everybody does things differently. And I think the sooner that we embrace that, this is really about sensory processing and cognitive well-being. And I don't know a single person in the built environment that isn't impacted by sound, lighting, temperature, but it's to what degree?
You're listening to the Happy Space podcast, where everyone can get things done. Today I'm speaking with Kay Sargent, principal designer at global architecture and design firm HOK, about their latest book, Neuroinclusive Workplace Design. I'm so thrilled you've joined today. I've got Kay Sargent back from HOK. And HOK, of course, is the global architecture and design firm. And Kay Sargent is a principal designer there. And what they're celebrating over at HOK, and with Kay in particular, right here as I record this in Neurodiversity Week, is the launch of the book Neuroinclusive Work Design. And what I love about this conversation with Kate, which I'm still buzzing from, is the fact that this book is the culmination of an idea, a seed that was planted over 8 years ago by a client of theirs who wanted to look after individuals with ADHD. And so that sparked curiosity. And where are we without curiosity? This is why I love Kay so much. She's not only asking the questions, but she's also championed the research, 6 research studies to build a body of work, which you'll see in this book, Neuroinclusive Workplace Design. And also actionable. What I love about Kay's focus here is that it's not just a bunch of high-level ideas. It gets really practical, things you can actually do to make a difference. And I want you to listen in detail to this episode. We unpack a lot. We talk about the prevalence of sensory sensitivity and what Kay's research was showing, which is similar to what I uncovered with Andre Solo in the episode about his book, Sensitive. We look at, you'll be hearing a lot about inclusive design and universal design. What's the difference? Where are we now with that? And Kay unpacks that beautifully for us. And we dive into a little bit of a conversation around complexity. How difficult it is to look at what we need to do and why we might shy away from it. We look at intersectionality, which is, hey, well, guess what? That's also complex. And we talk about the very challenge in today's culture of thinking, of taking the time to think and actually making it a normal and respected thing to do, and why it's challenged in so many ways. So please enjoy the conversation as we explore those principles. We dive in a little bit as well to neurological safety, a concept I've been working on, and I get Kay's take on that, which is really helpful. But what I really want you to take away from this is there are practical things you can do. Definitely go out and grab a copy of this book if you're in the design space, if you're thinking about how to create spaces that will invite the best performance of teams, of clients, of customers, of passengers, of students. There are going to be insights in here that are going to be useful for any of those perspectives. You're in for a treat. Kay is full of wisdom and sound bites as usual, brilliant ideas, and I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hey, Kay Sargent, I am so happy to have you back on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's a momentous occasion because just this week, your book has launched.
Yes.
And I've been excited about this body of work ever since we talked about it back on episode 2 of the podcast, because it was so important to me. This kicked off Happy Space.
Wait, I wasn't episode 1? Wow.
Yeah, sorry.
2, I'll take 2.
I thought I'd, sort of say hello first.
Okay. Yeah, good.
But we've come a long way. That was 2022. Yeah. We're now 2025.
Right.
This information will be timeless, so I don't mind date stamping a podcast with where we are now.
Yeah.
I'd love it if you could tell me and our listeners why this book, why HOK, why you, why now? Yes, and yes, for anybody just listening, designing neuroinclusive workplaces.
Yeah. So for us, it really started 8 years ago when a client at the end of a meeting, just casually as we were walking out the door, said, "Oh, by the way, how do you design space for someone that's ADHD?" Now, I'm the mother of 5 kids, and I've designed every kind of space you can imagine, and probably some you can't, on the planet in my 40 years as a designer. But I had an okay answer, but not a great answer. And so we started to dig into it so that I could give him a better answer. And what we found is there was lots of information out there about operationalizing and onboarding and, cultural issues in workplace, but really almost nothing about the environment. And so if you're bringing people into an organization where the space is not going to be supportive of them, then you're setting them up for failure. So we started to do some research, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew, and the awareness grew. I mean, I learn something new every day. I do, and I love that. And I think if I had a superpower, it would be curiosity. And so about a year ago, we were speaking at South by Southwest on the topic, and someone came up and said, we really want you to write this because we've never heard it from this perspective before. And so we did. We decided to put it all down. And I think HOK's commitment, for those that don't know, HOK is one of the world's largest architectural firms. There is a tremendous amount of IP and intellectual property and our thought leadership in this book, not just about neurodiversity, but workplace and how we should be designing them. But HOK's philosophy is that this is not a subject anybody should own. This is a moral imperative that we have to remove barriers in the built environment so that everyone can thrive and be successful. And we have an obligation to use our expertise and knowledge as designers to truly help do that.
This is why I love you. This is why this is exactly, it aligns with my thinking that my whole goal is to invite a more hospitable world. Why? Yeah. So more people contribute. Why? Because then they're fulfilled and we're not squandering human potential, and we deserve happier people in a happier world. And we can't have these barriers that we're creating and imposing on people.
Yeah. And it was interesting too, because, on one hand, we've held back some of this information because we're constantly learning. So we really struggled with the second you put something in a book, you kind of put a lid on it, right? Or a cover on it, I should say, if I'm going to use the right metaphor. But we're constantly learning. And so how do you balance that? And so in the book, there are links to almost all the research studies that we've done. And we've done 6, I believe now. Yeah. And there is a link to a list of recommendations that we make. We didn't put the list in there because then it's, time stamped. But if you have a link to it, then Claire, if you called me tomorrow and said, "Kay, I looked at this and there's this, I'd suggest you tweak this and say X, Y, and Z," I can be like, "Oh my God, that's brilliant. Let's do that." And so this list evolved over years of research. And I think we've got it to a point, it hasn't really changed in the last 6 months. So we felt comfortable putting it out there, but we want to be able to embrace the fact that we're continually learning and to be able to evolve it as we go.
I love the initial philosophy and this philosophy of constant curiosity, because you're right. I mean, even when I think back to my neurologist with MS who told me his words, "You're walking towards a cliff and you don't know when you're going to fall off." I'm like, we're now 11 years. No. Yeah, we're 11 years later from that conversation. Haven't fallen off a cliff. There's been new medical advancements. There's always learning opportunities and change. And so I love that you go in embracing that and also making room for the conversations.
Yeah. And I also think that we're, 8 years ago when we started talking about this, most people didn't know what this term even meant. Yeah. 20 years ago, most people only thought ADHD. Most people of my generation were never really diagnosed because you were just that hyper kid, right? So we are at a point now where the elephant in the room has been unveiled. People are rapidly learning. The masking is coming off. The stigmatism is going away. And right now, the number says 1 in 5. When we started this 8 years ago, it was 1 in 8. Now it's 1 in 5. Our research is actually showing that. I think it's going to be closer to 1 in 3.
Well, just on more. That, I interviewed Andre Solo, who looked into the highly sensitive temperament in more detail. And the latest research there is saying it's a typical bell curve. 30,
Yeah.
40, 30. So yeah, 1/3, if you're, the term high sensitivity is a bit of how do you define high? So what does that mean? But sensitive, not sensitive, somebody in between, the sensitive side. Yeah, I think you're right. It's about 1 in 3.
Yeah. And so we actually talk about this in the book. In the in the time that we've been doing this, the terminology has changed.
Mm.
And people can get very sensitive about the terminology.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
you might say it for, somebody tells you this is the way I prefer it, and then you use that, and then somebody else says that I prefer it the other way, right? So, okay, we have to make apologies and excuses for that. But I don't really like the term neurodiverse. Because first of all, we all are. Like everybody thinks and
It
processes
includes
things
everyone.
differently, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I think this is just it's everybody does things differently. And I think the sooner that we embrace that, this is really about sensory processing and cognitive well-being. And I don't know a single person in the built environment that isn't impacted by sound, lighting, temperature, right? We all are, but it's to what degree?
Yeah.
And Claire,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, to your point, we kind of look at this like there are people that are sensory neutral. There are people that are sensory avoiders, hyper. There are people that are actually need more sensory. They're sensory seekers, hypo. And there are people that have a acute or a high sensitivity and then a heightened sensitivity. And one of the things we found fascinating in our research is that men rarely have a high sensitivity. They can have a heightened sensitivity, but rarely a high. Women and individuals that consider themselves non-binary are 5 times as likely to have a high or acute sensitivity to sensory stimulation.
I totally buy that. I totally buy that when I look at, who was creating the nest with the little ones in it, right? As we look at, my degree is biology. So I come back to understanding how we are as animals all the time. And so, yes, women can do everything. Don't hate on me for saying we're also very good at nurturing and taking care of small beings and noticing the threats. It's our ability to notice requires that heightened sensitivity. And it's really interesting. My partner's a helicopter pilot. Talk about differences in sensory, sensitivity. But it's also, and this is why I like, how you talk about it affects everyone. He is sensitive to certain things at certain times. You bring in fatigue, you bring in, temperature, you bring in, everyone has sensitivity to something. I'm like, if we didn't, we'd all agree on the same pizza toppings. So
agreed. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think if you think about our world is so diverse. Even you think about the fashion industry, okay? In the fashion industry, almost nobody wears the same thing. Maybe occasionally.
Well, maybe the ones who wear black,
Right. Yeah. But even then it's a different color, like, or a different style or a different size, right? And I think for years, what we've done in many workplaces is the equivalent of, in the fashion industry, giving everybody a size 10 gray unitard and saying, this is what you have to wear. Man, woman, size 20, size 2, this is it. This is what you have to do. And we have oversimplified and made workplaces so generic because we're trying to cater to the average person doing the average thing. But I defy anybody to tell me who that is today. Like that doesn't exist. And so we have to break out of this notion that ultimately one size misfits all. And there is no such thing as one size fits all. There just isn't.
Well, absolutely. So, on that thought, I want to talk a little bit about inclusive design versus universal design and how do we get to, because I interviewed a leadership coach recently. She's like, I tell my CEOs, don't even try to please everybody. So how do we get at, from a design perspective, looking at those extremes and making the 300 plus pound person who's 6'4" and the 5'2" 100-pound person, and we're trying to buy office equipment, and we're trying to buy, and I actually was brought into a small company, like, look at our chairs, aren't they great? I said, yeah, except the person can't touch the floor. So, but what do we do here?
Okay, so I'm going to step into the mud here. Claire, you've
I came
teed
in,
me up.
I
You've,
invited you into mud last time.
you've teed me up perfectly to step into the mud. Um, I don't think I have ever heard so much conversation around universal design as I have in the last several months. And by the way, if you don't know, I know you know this, but if your listeners don't know, we are now speaking to you from Neurodiversity Week. Like this entire week is really kind of the celebration of neurodiversity. And there's a few other times during the year, but this week is that. And I don't think I've ever heard so much conversation around universal design. And universal design is fabulous. But it was introduced 30 years ago. It has 7 core principles, and they're aspirational. It doesn't tell us how. It tells us lovely things like we should be able to create things with low effort or eligibility or that don't endanger individuals, right? But it doesn't necessarily tell you how to do that. And so just simply saying we need to implement universal design, we've been doing that for 30 years. Most of us have been trying to do that for 30 years. That hasn't got us where we need to be. We need to go a step further. And that step further, I think, is really, we'll define it as inclusive design, which really kind of takes it to that next level and expands that. And then we're going to take it to that next level. And, again, like I said, in the book, we have 140, 150-ish recommendations or considerations that we think people should be thinking about to actionize those aspirational elements and make them very tactile so that you can execute on that. Because if I tell you, design the space so everyone is treated equally.
Not specific enough. Not specific enough.
We do that. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So, and I think we also need to think about intersectionality. None of us are just one thing. We are thinking about race, gender, social economic, level of education, religious preferences, physical health, neurological health, mental health, age, all of those things are impacting who we are, sexual orientation, all of those things are impacting who we are, and we can't just function and avoid it. And the challenge is we're trying to take those one at a time, and we really need to broaden them out. And a lot of them overlap, but we need to broaden that out and do a better job.
Yeah, I've been saying we need to embrace complexity. We need nuance is necessary. And I think there's a reluctance because it's complicated. Wait a minute, that means it requires patience. It requires digging in. It's going to cost a lot. And I think it paralyzes people because it's complex. What do you say? What have you noticed in terms of an appetite to realize, oh, well, we can't just stick a sensory room and call it done. If we're going to, I can bring my own fidget spinner is I think going to be a title of a talk, because it goes beyond that. And I see, we need options. We need options. What do you say?
I think what's happening right now is, well, I'll give you an example of just a small microcosm of what I think is happening. I went to present the other day to about 400 people from an organization that brought us in to talk to them about designing for inclusion. And it was a wide variety of people in the organization. And when we first started to talk about this, the first question that somebody said is, how many of you know what neurodiversity is or neuroinclusion is? And maybe about 20% of the people raised their hand. Okay. We spoke for 1 hour and shared a bunch of the information that we have. And at the end of that hour, we were going to do an exercise, but the same gentleman that had asked the first question said, okay, so how many of you all are impacted by this? 95% of the hands in the room went up. 95. And it's like, wait a minute. An hour ago, only 20 of you even knew what this was, right? And I think it was realizing, the older generation has gone grossly underdiagnosed. There's a whole lot of people that have family members, children, colleagues that are. And I think there is an unveiling that is happening right now. And then people are realizing that, not only do they struggle, but I'm struggling in spaces where there's, loud noise or sound or temperature or whatever. We're just all suffering through it. And I think I love this notion that individuals that are neurodivergent tend to be the canary in the coal mine.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to feel it.
Milla's book behind me.
Yes, absolutely. Right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They're going to feel it first and more intensely. It does not mean that the rest of us aren't suffering through that. And let's just take that a little bit further, right?
Yeah.
This whole conversation about adjustments, everybody's like, well, what is that going to cost for the small percentage of the population?
Yeah.
That's the wrong question. The question is, what is it costing you for that canary who's telling you there's something bad in the space that's negatively impacting all of us?
Yeah.
What is it costing you not to address that?
You know what happens though? They get rid of the canaries so they don't have to hear that song anymore. But I mean, this is personally what happened to me. I call it being designed out,
Yeah.
right? Because it was like, oh no, that's difficult. I want you in for your mentorship. You need to come in every day of the week, even though your job is 90% on the phone. You need to be in the office. And if you're not, you're out.
Yeah. So here's what I would like everybody who is listening to this just to think about for a minute. We are all running so hard and fast, and we all have bias, and we assume that everybody is impacted by the same things that we are.
Yes.
If you're not, and so if you, and every one of us right now is dealing with a colleague, a friend, a spouse, a child that is different from us and is driving us nuts, right? And we're trying to get them to conform to our way of doing things. Like, why can't he sit still in a meeting? Why can't they just turn their camera on and like they insist on having it off because, they might struggle with eye contact? Why are they always fidgeting? Why are they multitasking all the time? Why can't they complete a task like early? Why are they procrastinators, right? And I think what we need to do is to just think that not everyone is like us. And B, how can we meet somebody where they are? And I had I think a lovely exchange once where somebody came up to me and said, we were having a problem with an employee. We had just decided we were going to fire them. And I was in the hallway, and then I came into a presentation that you were giving, and I heard your presentation, and I thought, oh my God, I now know what the issue is. Hold off on firing him. They went back and had a conversation about how do you work best? Like, what actually works for you? And he said, I really like having a recording of the meetings.
Yeah.
I need tasks broken down. I can't sit in really long meetings where I'm not, essential or really a part of it. I need to move and engage. And they made some adjustments.
Yeah.
Rather than forcing him to fit in, they made some adjustments for him. He's now their chief innovation officer.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. People get designed out rather than that question. What do you need to succeed? Like, what do you need?
Einstein, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, they would all be designed out of our offices today.
100%. Yeah. Today's episode of the Happy Space podcast is sponsored by ClareKumar.com. With sensitivity, curiosity, and courage, I serve 3 groups asking the tough questions that lead to meaningful answers. Number 1, I coach ambitious leaders to design for well-being and achieve next-level work-life integration. Number 2, I mic drop thought bombs, that's bombs as in BALMS, in keynotes and workshops, helping organizations achieve the business imperative that is inclusivity. And 3, I collaborate with brands concerned with respect for well-being on product design, marketing, and PR. If any of this piqued your interest, come find me at ClareKumar.com. I'd love to speak with you. Designing inclusive performance together will lead to the richest results.
And we need to think about, are we enabling the best and the brightest? Or just people that are different to function? And if not, what can we do to accommodate that? And usually it's really simple stuff.
Right? You want to elaborate on that? The simple stuff?
56% of adjustments cost absolutely nothing. Breaking down a task into multiple different sections costs nothing,
Cost cognitive power, cognitive energy on the person who has to break down the task. There's no financial. I always like to break my resources. I say, don't run out of steam. Space, time, energy, attention, and money.
Right.
We've got resources to take care of there. So this attention piece is.
And let me just give you a really personal, practical example.
Yeah.
My youngest son, I have 5 children. My youngest son has ADHD, OCD, ADHD. He now thinks he might have been misdiagnosed. But for a lot of individuals, time is binary. It is either now or not now. Okay. Which means, or let's just put it in the way a neurotypical person would say it, you're a procrastinator.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you don't do anything until the last minute. Okay. It's
Or
amazing that
you're
he made it through high
lazy.
school. Right. It's amazing he made it through high school because I am not a procrastinator. I pace things out and I want to get it all done really, really early. And he wouldn't even start an assignment before the night it was due. And, it's this massive thing. And he was brilliant so he could do it, but it just drove me insane. There are people like that in the office. And so in a sense with him, what I had to do is say, the agenda and the outline for your book is due on Monday to me. This is due on Tuesday. This is due on Wednesday. This is due on Friday. The whole thing is due on Friday. But just telling him that he had this big thing due on Friday, he couldn't function that way, right? And so sometimes, we tend to all have spiky
100%.
profiles.
100%. I mean, this is what I've coached on for 20 years is individually on how to be more productive, how to manage your performance. I used to talk to my kids' teachers. And if you look in the teaching profession, there's a lot of ADHD. So when I say it costs nothing, no, it costs something, but it's a cognitive load and it's thinking about something people hadn't realized they have to think about. And so it's, I think as we say it's easy, well, it's going to cost you something, but not the money. It's not going to cost you money.
Directly. Yeah, and in the book, there are 20 contributors that we interviewed and 4 case studies. And 2 of the contributors really spoke about the spoon theory, right? Yeah. And the spoon theory that we all have a certain amount of energy. And when your energy is gone, it's gone. Yeah. And people that are neurodivergent, just getting through a day can take a lot more energy because things that I might be able to ignore,
oh my God,
they're having to actively either block out or do it. So it takes them more energy just to get through something. So they run out of energy or they can run out of energy much more quickly, especially if they're in spaces or environments that they're constantly having to battle everything that is coming at them. And when they're out, they're out.
That was me with the commute. So you imagine going in underground tunnels and you can imagine a noisy subway system. In Montreal, they have rubber wheels, so they're not as loud, but in Toronto, nope. And it's smaller and it's close and the seats are still only 17 inches wide. And you put a down jacket on that on a growing population. When are the seats going to be, acknowledging the fact that people are bigger than they used to be? There's a lot of pressure from a lot of different points. I was like, I needed a recovery room when I got to work. Just to do all of that. There was none of that.
Those spaces are lacking. And it's really interesting because, we talk about 6 modalities of work, the 6 things that you're doing. And okay, so a little quick stuff. It's concentrate, which is deep, meaningful thought. It's contemplate, which is just almost like free thinking, right? Like when you're right, right. And that's actually when you get a lot of your best ideas, right? Yep. Or just to refresh or reset, like you might have just got off a really crazy phone call or just had a horrible commute. Then there's commune, you're doing things together but alone, congregate, socializing, and creating. Mm-hmm. A lot of people want to combine contemplate and contemplate together. And most of us are contemplating when we're doing things like in the shower or maybe commuting if it's not driving us nuts or exercising.
We don't value that time. We don't value what it looks like because we think now you're not doing anything because we value busy and action.
Yeah. And that's actually when your brain is wandering and actually probably coming up, processing things and probably coming up with some of the best ideas. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly on, and the best time that most of us get our greatest ideas is right before we fall asleep, because your mind, you're trying to just let everything go, but your mind is free to wander. And that's when you're like, oh my God, did I actually send that email? I wake up in the morning with solutions to problems that I went to bed with. And sometimes I didn't even know I had that problem, but in the middle of the night, I'll realize I did and solve the problem, whatever. So that's why I look the way I do, because I don't sleep when I do. I sleep really, really well. But we all function differently, right? And having that ability to just have that mindset or that time to do that can be really, really important.
Yeah. And it would help if organizations actually gave voice to that. We don't require you to look busy. We actually don't require your butt to be in this seat. Go take walks, have some fluidity. I have another shirt that says autonomy is for adults. That's good. It's like we're grown-ups.
I heard the story one time where a guy was telling me that he's perfected the art of looking busy when he's not. And I'm like,
What does he
you
do?
kind of take that as a negative connotation. He said, but I need to process things. Like again, spiky profiles. Some people process things instantly. Other people need to like let it ruminate over time. Okay. And so he said, I'd be sitting at my desk thinking, and people would look at him like, what are you doing? You're just sitting there. And he's like, I'm thinking. Right. And so people would judge him. And so he said he would literally pretend to be typing so
Wow.
that people wouldn't judge him when he was thinking.
That's the saddest thing I've heard. That's the
But
saddest, like
it's
I've heard
true.
in
I
a
think
long time.
if you went to any office and just saw somebody sitting there, you'd be like, what is wrong with that person? Now and again,
Right.
like
Because we haven't normalized this.
we don't normalize thinking. And
That's
most of
right.
us are thought, knowledge workers, right?
Yeah. Well, in fact, not only do we not normalize it, our culture sabotages it. So I went down to try and attend. It was the NSA Speakers Conference, and I
Yeah.
drove down Toronto to Nashville, and we were planning to go on to Elvis Land and Graceland and all of that. And the hotel was so loud. I had to shout to try and check in. I had asked for a quiet room,
Yeah.
and 6 weeks before, yeah, sure. When you get there, we'll set you up with one. Tried 3 different rooms, could not escape noise. It was, I don't know if you've been to this location. It's 3 cavernous sort of hotels connected with an atrium in which they add 3-story waterfalls
Mm,
with water coming down. And then they have
yeah.
musicians over top of that. And then they
Yeah.
have banners saying, this is the summer of more. And I'm thinking, so I tried to, can I navigate this space? Can I find a place where my nervous system can regulate? Is there, we stayed one night and I'm like, we're not going to the conference. We're out of here. I went to the swimming pool in the morning, Kay, because I thought, at least I'll go to my happy place. They
Yeah.
piped music into the water in the pool. You are not allowed to think. The Graceland Hotel, I listened, and I encourage all venues that are hosting events to post a video of the soundscape. Actually record it. Because when I watched the person give the tour of the hotel, I went, oh, I ain't staying there, because it was nonstop 24/7 Elvis music piped through the hallways. So I
You go
can't.
to Graceland, Claire. Yeah. No, I think it's interesting too because we have a lot of clients now that are starting to. I think sound is one of the issues that people misunderstand the most. And people often ask for really quiet spaces. And sometimes really quiet spaces can be really creepy, right? Because we just naturally, even in nature, there's noises and hums and buzzes and things that are happening. And I think it's about getting to the right level of sound and then having spaces where for those that need that extra sound can do it and for those that don't. And again, I think in all of our research, what we've really come to is options, choice, and variety and some kind of control are really the important things because what might work for you may not work for me. I was telling you the story earlier about like the loops, and some people really love the loops and other people struggle with them, et cetera, because they want to hear noise or music, et cetera. So I think we just need to be able to create environments that we acknowledge the built environment is having an impact on us and how it is doing so. So we're really excited about putting all of that into the book and getting that out there for everyone to share. And we share a lot, maybe in some cases, maybe too much. But you know what? If we are the only ones that are talking about it, then it's not going to pick up critical speed and mass. And that's really what we need to happen today. So we're happy to share it with everyone.
Well, I'm really grateful for that. You talked about, having the choice, and that brought me to talk to you a little bit more about neurological safety, which is a concept I've been working on. We're pretty comfortable now with this concept of I need psychological safety in the workplace. We got comfortable thinking about our physical safety in COVID, and let's have the air clean and the surfaces clean.
And space around me. And yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, the space around, exactly, from the virus protection. But we haven't thought about physical touch. We haven't thought about crowds. We haven't thought about what I call neurological safety. And I've broken it down to 3 different elements. I call it neurological safety because it's those conditions which invite us to keep calm and carry on, which I think we need now, right?
So it's interesting because in the book, we talk about what are the things in all 6 of our research initiatives we've looked at, what are the things and the elements that are causing you stress.
Yeah.
And sound, lighting, and temperature are the top 3.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah.
But proximity and densification
Yes.
are also, if somebody is standing way too close to you, you get very uncomfortable. Or if you're in a space that's like too tight. And we got desensitized to this in COVID. And now I think, it's been being in crowded spaces feels a little normal again. But I don't, if you ever traveled to some places in Asia where it's a lot more dense,
I lived in
takes
Tokyo.
you a day or two.
I lived in Tokyo, subways.
It takes you a day or two just to kind of adjust to that. But even open and closed, a lot of people will say everybody needs to be in an enclosed space because open spaces are so horrible. Well, actually, what we found is more people were bothered by being in an enclosed space, right? They felt trapped in, they couldn't move, they couldn't fidget. They felt like they were being observed or monitored or contained. And so again, it's fascinating that what might work for one person does not necessarily work for somebody else. And we need to create spaces that are more balanced. And I think right now the tendency is to dumb everything down and just make it all like, blah, because we don't want to overload anybody.
We don't want to have to think about it.
Well, but nowhere in nature is a rectangular white box. And so we're putting these people in spaces that are just not comfortable or natural to them, and they're not able to function. And so just dumbing everything down is not the right solution either. It's about designing with intent and understanding what it is that you're doing and being able to apply that intelligently.
Absolutely. I have a Scotiabank below me, and I've talked about Scotiabank and TD Bank on the podcast before about design things that they've done. What I noticed yesterday, it's very white and red. There's a white leather couch. There was a green plant in the window yesterday, and my jaw hit the floor.
Crazy.
And I smiled so hard at this plant. I was like, a sign of life inside a bank. Wow. Right. I just want to come back a little bit to the neurological safety, because I've broken it down to 3 elements, and I'd love to just bounce that off you.
Yeah, sure.
The first one you totally get. I say it needs to be sensory supportive, and that means it caters to the sensory stimulation that you're seeking, or it gives you the ability to your point of control, to adjust it to be what you need it to be, right? It's either there or you can tweak it. The next piece, and I think this causes a great deal of stress now, is that our processes have to be cognitively kind. The wayfinding has to be good. The website has to work. The 2-factor authentication on your phone. We have so many speed bumps now that can shut us down. Yeah. And the cognitive load, it has to be cognitively kind. That's the second point.
We have to design space that is legible and intuitive, right? And so sometimes, like in an airport, having too much signage is actually overwhelming.
Yes.
And sometimes it's about having just that clear vista of seeing what is coming and what's predictable. Like in the early days of WeWork, a lot of the spaces were designed as kind of almost like mazes because they wanted people to connect. That causes a lot of people high anxiety and grief because they can't predict it. And we all have this thing called prospect and refuge. I want to be able to clearly see what is out there and clearly understand how do I get out if I need to. And the perfect example of this is early on in the pandemic, when you probably went to a grocery store for the first time. We were all prospecting and refuging. You were looking down an aisle, checking out how many people were in it, if they were masked or not, or running around, and making an executive decision about, do I go there or will I double back, right? And instinctively, we are constantly doing that all day long.
100%, especially the people with nervous systems that are already on the sensitive side. It's like double down on that as a way of being. So sensory supportive, cognitively kind. And the last piece is that the space, culture, or experience needs to be emotionally engaging. So the signs, I don't know if you see it where you are, but I see signs on the regular when I'm out in a space. We will not tolerate rudeness. It's basically saying we're expecting bad behavior. And there's a way to turn that messaging that says, we want to treat you kindly. We want to treat you with love. We hope you'll do the same. Or, there's a way to turn language around that all of a sudden makes you feel okay to be there. Not like, oh, something bad happened here.
My pilot said that on the airplane last night. He said, "We want you to treat the stewards with respect, and in turn they will do that for you. But if whatever." And they just kind of alluded to the fact that there was going to be bad behavior on the plane, which I
Right.
thought almost opened the box. I think this goes
Exactly.
back to the double empathy issue, right? Is that we need to be able to understand that not everybody is like us, and to see things sometimes from their perspectives, and to start with a level of kindness. And
Yeah.
there probably is a little bit of shortfalling of that right now in the world. I think a lot of people are looking out for themselves. They're not necessarily thinking about the collective good. And, as an individual, you could only be as free, as happy, as engaged as the collective good. If everything else is going to, pot around you, you're not going to be in a good situation for long. So I think we all have kind of forgotten the fact that we have a responsibility for the well-being of everyone around us, because that ultimately impacts us too.
We know we're not seeing that modeled. We're not seeing that
Yeah.
modeled politically in different cultures and to different degrees. I traveled to Bali and I saw great compassion, tons of density, tons of people moving, but consideration for the other. I traveled to Uruguay and Argentina and I saw similar things. If I was lost in a store, they weren't like, "It's over in aisle 43. Good luck, lady."
Yeah.
They
Let
walk
me
with
walk you
you.
over.
They
Yeah.
walk you to there you are, man. But you're like, "What?" I felt so considered, so
Yeah.
appreciated. So I think we have an invitation to look at this whole thing, like what helps me keep calm and carry on, which is what we need in this time. And
Yes, absolutely.
I think this design piece is so very important. The work that you've done to do the research. Thank you. Can I just express my gratitude for building a
Well, I
body of
appreciate that.
work?
Thank you for being a big supporter of all of the stuff that we're doing. And we're just getting started. This is a long journey. There's a lot happening. There's a whole lot of people that are waking up right now and asking the right kinds of questions. And I hope that we continue to do the research. There's some really fascinating areas that we've discovered, but there are other things that are yet to be discovered. So we encourage everybody to lean in a little bit. And again, I think our philosophy is like, when you design for the extreme, you benefit the mean, meaning we all benefit when we can create spaces for people that might be a little bit more marginalized.
Yeah, I'm actually off to Madrid in early April now for the Passenger Terminal Expo. And I'll be speaking on a panel there about, and this came out of comments on LinkedIn I made about design in airport terminals and people with hidden disabilities. And so I'm really excited to share some points about my observations. It's so funny. I've been taking pictures as I travel. What? This could be better. This is fantastic, and I finally have a place to share them, which is really exciting.
Okay, so Claire, then my advice to you is, there is an airport story in the book about an engagement that we had with a client when we were designing one, and read that first.
I will.
That's probably the thing that will resonate with you. I think there are things in the book, for the real designers and then just the humans. And there's a lot of personal stories. There's a lot of case studies. So hopefully everybody can find something that resonates with them.
Well, let me just let everybody know where to find the book. So if you go to inclusiveworkplace.design, that's where you can find your very own copy of the book. Support this great work, share it out, and incorporate it into your work. If you're an architect, designer, a leader thinking about how to influence space, in the corporate world and beyond. Kay Sargent, it's always, always, always a treat to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me to join.
Thanks so much for spending time here. Check out happyspacepod.com for links to all the episodes, including on YouTube, our online community, and helpful tools for work that fits. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment on social media, or even better, drop a review. And please share with someone else who also deserves a happy space.